First to New York, where Trump and Michael Cohen are set to face each other in court for a second day as Cohen testifies in the civil fraud trial. But Cohen isn't the only former Trump ally now turned potential legal threat. In Georgia, this is Jenna Ellis. Remember what happened yesterday? She's the latest Trump lawyer to accept a plea deal, while ABC News is reporting that Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, has been granted immunity in Jack Smith's federal election investigation. And we should note NBC hasn't confirmed that report, and Meadows' lawyer called it, quote, largely inaccurate. Let's bring in NBC News correspondent Dasha Burns outside the New York City courthouse. And also with us, former federal prosecutor Christy Greenberg. First to Dasha, as this civil fraud trial is resuming this morning, what can we expect for day two?
Well, Anna, first, let me catch you up quickly on what was an explosive day in court yesterday as Michael Cohen took a stand and gave testimony that really only he can give as the AG's star witness. He described in detail how former President Trump directed him and Trump Organization CFO Allen Weisselberg to inflate his wealth significantly. He described how Trump essentially asked them to reverse engineer his wealth, describing how Trump would give them a number that he believed was appropriate for his net worth, and then how he would ask them then to essentially make that true. At one point saying he would look at the numbers they would give him, saying it was $4 billion, that was his net worth. He would say, no, I think I'm worth more like $6 billion, and then have them go back to the office and essentially make that happen by inflating the value of his various assets, his properties, etc. Now, where we left off yesterday and where we pick up today is the cross-examination of Michael Cohen by Trump's attorney, Alina Habba. Yesterday, she really put him in the hot seat, undermining his truthfulness, talking about how back in 2018, in his guilty plea, getting him to admit that he lied in that guilty plea. Now, the reason that is important is, again, she's trying to undermine him, paint him as a liar in front of the judge, and hoping that that helps, her case helps the defense here, Anna.
Okay, so Christy, that is where it left off. Trump's lawyer getting Cohen to admit that he lied many times before, including under oath, before a judge, before Congress. How big of a deal is that?
It's a very big deal. Michael Cohen pled guilty to tax evasion, making false statements in financial documents to bank, and campaign violations. So he lied to the IRS. He lied to banks in making these financial statements. He also lied to Congress. That was a separate charge as well. And he repeatedly lied to the special counsel's office in their initial interviews with him in the Mueller investigation. And now that he's pled guilty to all of that, now after his guilty plea, he's claiming he lied at the guilty plea and saying, no, actually, I didn't commit tax evasion, when he said under oath to a judge that he did. So this is a lot of baggage. There is a lot there for a defense attorney to work with in cross-examining him. You had the SDNY during the plea talking about his deception and his pattern of just brazen criminal conduct. There's a lot to work with. But really, this is not a jury trial. This is a trial just before a judge. And so really what the judge is going to do here is assess his credibility, but really look to see if there are ways that Michael Cohen is being corroborated. In the ways that he's talking about the inflation of assets, is there any corroborating evidence, whether there's other testimony of other people who are part of these conversations, any documents? I think there was some testimony about the fact that Donald Trump in his handwriting would put certain numbers in red ink about what the number he wanted to reach was. Those kinds of things. If there is evidence to corroborate Michael Cohen, then, potentially the judge is in a position to credit him, at least with respect to some of this testimony. And in order for the AG to succeed on a number of these counts that require proof of intent to defraud, Michael Cohen's testimony is incredibly important to proving that intent.
So let's go through a couple other developments. Let's turn to Georgia here. 4 co-defendants, 4, have now taken a plea deal in the election interference case in Fulton County. The latest, Jenna Ellis, and here's how the Washington Post described her in court yesterday. Quote, her plea came with something the others did not, a tearful statement to the court that suggested she is prepared to cast blame up the chain. Whether and how much that includes Trump is a big question, but it would seem to be bad news for Rudy Giuliani and potentially by extension for Trump himself. How worried should Giuliani be and Trump?
So I think that Giuliani should be worried. It's clear from what she said in court that she's flipped on Giuliani. I think Trump actually has less reason to be concerned. And the reason I say that is because of what her statement said. It's important to note she did not admit that she knew at the time that she was making these voter fraud claims, she did not admit that she knew they were false. She said, if I knew now, if I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have done it. But she basically claims she was duped. She said that she was relying on more experienced lawyers like Rudy to give her truthful and reliable information. And really, she's just guilty of not fact-checking them. And of course, that's preposterous. This is a woman who, is not a junior lawyer. She's an experienced lawyer. She's 38 years old. To just say, well, I relied on somebody else for the evidence, when all she was saying the entire time was that you needed the facts, you needed the evidence, and that was the core of their claims. It's just really preposterous. And she's really seemed to me in her statement in that plea not to really own her conduct, not to own her role. Of course, she knew that Trump didn't win in a landslide. Of course, she knew there wasn't evidence of that. And she knew it at the time. And so part of what the prosecutors are going to want to know is her conversations, what Giuliani knew, what Trump knew. And if she can't say what she knew, how is she going to then be believed when she's pointing the finger about what they knew?
Well, it's Jenna Ellis, it's Chesbrough, Sidney Powell, 3 lawyers in that Georgia election case now taking those plea deals and agreeing to testify in proceedings. Dasha, we also, as we just reported, have this new news from ABC News that's reporting former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows has been granted immunity by Special Counsel Jack Smith, and that Meadows informed the Special Counsel that he repeatedly told Trump that the election fraud claims were baseless. Trump just spoke about that. What did he say?
Yeah, that's right, Anna. I asked him about this news just as he was about to go into court this morning. Again, NBC News has not confirmed these reports, but here's what he had to say.
I don't believe that, because I've spoken to Mark Meadows many, many times over the years, and he strongly believed the election was rigged. Mark Meadows always felt it was rigged. The whole thing was rigged. It was rigged, and it was stolen. And because it was rigged and stolen, our country's gone to hell.
And again, Meadows' lawyer telling NBC News that these reports are, quote, largely inaccurate. Anna.